There's new fallout after racist remarks at a Los Angeles City Council meeting were leaked.
And at first, they're talking about redistricting. This is not just her. It is a number of prominent Latino leaders here in Los Angeles.
Captured Martinez and Councilmember Kevin De Leon making racist and disparaging remarks in 2021. The attacks targeted fellow Councilmember Mike Bonin and his young son, who is black. The comments, which were spoken behind closed doors in 2021, referred to an MLK parade in which Bonin participated in with his son.
And then there's this white guy with this little black kid who's misbehaved. They're raising him like a little white kid, which I was like, this kid needs a beat down. Like, let me take him around the corner and then I'll bring him back. Yeah.
Councilmember Bonin releasing a statement saying, in part, "We are appalled, angry, and absolutely disgusted that Nuri Martinez attacked our son with horrific racist slurs and talked about her desire to physically harm him." The LA Times reported that during the conversation, De Leon also appeared to compare Bonin's handling of his son to Martinez carrying a Louis Vuitton handbag.
It's an accessory. When we do the MLK parade,
just like when
they used to have those statues in the
plantations. And then when Nuri brings her little yard bag or the Louis Vuitton bag, and like
there's some negrito like on the side.
Yeah,
I see a lot of little short, dark people.
Yeah, puro Oaxacan Koreans. Not even like Kevin, little ones.
I don't know where people are from. I was like, I don't know what village they came out and got here, but.
I'm wearing shoes.
Downhill.
The conversation reportedly taking place during a meeting that also included Councilmember Gil Cedillo and Ron Herrera, president of the LA County Federation of Labor. The group was discussing the redrawing of council district boundaries.
They did go on to talk about in this statement about an effort to weaken the black political power here in Los Angeles. And of course, this is coming just weeks before an election where LA voters will decide their next mayor and also a number of city council seats here. But people here, of course, are very upset.
Good evening, Dr. Malvo. Good evening, Councilmember Bonin. You know, when we named this convention and we gave it the theme, Dismantling Racism, that was back in June. Little did we know how apropos the theme would be for where we sit right now. You know, when I first had the opportunity to hear that tape, when I first had the opportunity to hear what was going on, I tell you, my first initial reactions was disgust. I was repulsed. You know, it was sickening what I was hearing. I was hearing them attack us for being black, nothing more. And it reminds us that we have so far to go as the NAACP, we have so far to go as people when we have folks that are standing on nationalism to attack us. So we're gonna start with questions. We're gonna have a conversation here today. And when we get the opportunity, I would love to make sure we have waters for our distinguished guests here. But we're gonna start with you, Councilmember Bonin. You were the first one and your family was attacked.
Thank you.
Thank you. How did you hear about the recording and what was your first reaction?
So it was 2 weeks ago today. It was 2 weeks ago Saturday. I was actually out of town. I was visiting my family on the East Coast for the funeral of a close friend of mine. And my son and husband were back here. And Saturday afternoon, I got a phone call from a friend who called to give me a heads up. He said, there's these tapes out about conversations between Nuri and Gil and Kevin and Ron Herrera, and I need you to sit down because there's something really, really bad on there. Wow. And he gave me a quick overview. And he told me where I could download the tapes, so I downloaded them, and then I had to go out. And I had no idea that they were circulating around with the press. And a few hours later, I got an urgent phone call from someone from the LA Times. And they gave me a couple of the details. A whole much more we heard later, but they gave me a couple of the details. And I was stunned, shocked, disgusted, angry, heartbroken. I mean, it was a whole range. I mean, I think mainly I was in a state of shock. And then the next morning, when the LA Times printed the story, it was just like getting hit in the face by a bag of bricks. And about an hour after the story ran, they called me back. The reporter, Ben Oreskes, called me back and said, Mike, I hate to do this to you, hate to do this to your family, but our Spanish language reporters just listened to the tape. And she called your son a monkey. And I broke down then. And, I talked to a couple of my colleagues, Marquise Harris Dawson and Assemblyman Isaac Bryan, and I knew I had to fight for my son. And honestly, it was a complicated range of stuff, because I want to defend my son, I want to fight for my son. But by then I had heard about the rest of the tapes. And I knew it was a lot bigger than my son. The thing was just dripping with ugly, deliberate, coordinated anti-black racism. And I didn't want the story to be focused on an angry white dad, because it was about something much bigger. And so trying to figure out how to navigate that and call for their resignations and try to keep the story on the bigger stuff was, it's been 2 weeks and I still have not begun to wrap my head around it.
I can imagine, but let me tell you this. I know you say you want to fight for your son, but know this, that the NAACP is in that very fight with you for your son. We're not going to stand for anti-blackness. Dr. Malvo, same thing. When did you hear about it? How did you hear about it? What was your first reaction?
Well, I actually didn't hear about it on Saturday because, unfortunately, old girl liked to hang out from time to time. On Sunday, I was in a car with some friends really early, about 9 a.m., both civil rights lawyers, and we were headed down to Palm Springs. And there was an NPR story on it, and we literally spent the next 2 hours chopping it up about it. I would say that I was angry, disgusted, but also not surprised.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Because anti-black racism is woven into the very fabric of this nation. And too many people think it's okay to denigrate black people. And if you think about the Greek mythology where Zeus sent Hercules to slay Hydra. Hydra was a 7-headed serpent. And whenever Hercules sliced off the head, 2 more would come. And from that perspective, this Nuri, and I said, this Nuri has resigned, whatever. De Leon refuses to resign, and black people are going to be sleeping outside his house until he does. Mm-hmm. And the other one,
Gil.
Yeah, he was beaten already, so I guess he wants to get his last couple months of pay. But
we're going to talk about that.
Yes, we will. but the bottom line there is the resignations are insufficient in terms of combating anti-blackness. I am the dean of the College of Ethnic Studies at Cal State LA, a place that is known for its anti-blackness. To the point, actually, that I had a colleague said to me, well, Nuri shouldn't have had to resign. And I said, I have been trying to upgrade my vocabulary, so we can't talk. So there's some folks in here, I'm a life member of the NAACP in the San Francisco branch. Might remember me from back in the day when I was a vice president, first vice president to be exact. So people have always cautioned me about my mouth and said, you can't call people out of their name. Well, hey. But I had to tell this woman, I can't talk to you. Because if you have to tell me that women should not have resigned, you and I really have nothing to say to each other. People are making excuses. But the fact is that, again, as I say, I hope that James Thomas is in the room. There he is. This is one of my faculty members who also was one of the people who did a study about anti-blackness and the climate of anti-blackness at Cal State LA. And one would think Cal State LA, but there is documented anti-blackness. I could tell stories, but I won't. James can tell you an encounter I had with some fried chicken. which was really not fried chicken. It was a colleague who asked me if I brought the fried chicken to a buffet. In 2022, a white male fellow dean asked me if I brought the fried chicken to the buffet. And then when I said, I think the provost's office ordered the food, he said, but I saw you eating fried chicken. Okay, like I said, I've been trying to upgrade my vocabulary. So I didn't say anything. I just got on the plane going to Congressional Black Caucus in DC, woke up from sleeping with tears rolling down my face, and I realized it was because I was angry and because I didn't slap the you-know-what out the man, which was not an option for a lady. However, we don't always have to be a lady every day. But in any case, I wrote that man an 800-word memo on a Wednesday. He resigned on Friday.
All right. All right.
Could you write a letter to Kevin De Leon for me?
Well, we're going to talk about, we're going to get into what actions and how much further we can take this. But Dr. Malvo, I just want to continue to build on what you're saying. I respect so much of your educational background, but even more respect that this woman is a lifetime member, a long time lifetime member of the NAACP. Let's go ahead, let's give her a round of applause. Councilmember Bonin, I'm hoping that you're going to be our next lifetime member of the NAACP
Absolutely.
as well.
Damn right.
We would definitely love to have you as part of the family. You're already part of the family, but we want you to be a lifetime member. But Dr. Malvo, from your viewpoint, as you're talking about these things, what do you suppose folks like this that represent themselves as being inclusive about black and brown people, but publicly, they're spewing hate, privately, they're spewing hate and racism. What do you think that comes from?
It comes from the desire for power. In a predatory capitalist society, what people are looking for is power. They want to oppress other people. So you have a lot of my brown brothers and sisters. I do say brown brothers and sisters because many of us work together, but they beat themselves on the chest for people of color. But they don't mean us. They just mean people of color. It's a very convenient shorthand for saying, I'm down. But you know, everybody brown ain't down.
That's right.
And so when you say people of color, we think you're representing us, but when you're behind closed doors, you're representing you. And what you're doing is being motivated, motivated by predatory capitalism, motivated by anti-blackness, motivated by the fact that you think you can get away with it. Absolutely. You truly think you can get away with it. And why is that? Because so many have. And I mean, not to excavate ancient history, but let's not forget what then Senator Biden said about then Senator Obama. This now, they became bromancing and all that stuff. But before that, what did he say? He was what?
Clean,
cut,
articulate.
Right. Those are all dog whistles. What they were really saying is he ain't Jesse Jackson. Mm-hmm. That's literally what they were saying. And this is a good Negro, and we could probably we could work with him. So, but this is, not to pick on Brother Biden, because Brother Biden has repented, seen the error of his ways, forgiven some student loans, not enough, but some, threw some money at HBCUs, not enough, but some. So we're not going to dwell on that, but all I'm saying is that behind closed doors, people we think are our allies are only our allies on the surface. Beneath that, they are basically protecting their own interests. And the problem with the conversation, and brother, I am so sorry that Nuri woman felt like she had to call your child, use a racist trope on your child, a child. In politics, I've been covering, been in, whatever politics, I don't even want to tell y'all how long. Well, at least 40 years. I ran for office in San Francisco, blah, 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 blah. But one of the unwritten rules is you don't play with people's children.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. You can talk to them about them like four-legged dogs, but you do not deal with people's children. So that was what was so hurtful about that. But Brother President, the deal is that these folks do this because that's what their hearts are, because they have permission, because anti-blackness is woven into the fabric of this nation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Councilmember, I want to take this back into City Hall. I don't know the answer to this question. Is it known, is it rumored that you have members of the council that act like this in private, or were you completely taken aback with surprise? Be honest. I'm trying to articulate
don't give them
the best way. I am. They're getting no passes from me.
Exactly.
Ever.
All right.
Ever. I was not surprised. It's kind of like if you live in Los Angeles, which is earthquake territory. When an earthquake hits, in that moment you are shocked, but you can't be surprised there was an earthquake in Los Angeles, right?
There you go.
And that's what this was. I've known these three for a number of years. My colleague Marquise, when we were talking about it, he said, yeah, I'm not surprised. It was them turned up 20%. And so I was shocked by Monkey. I was shocked by beatdown of my kid. I was shocked. My kid's 8 now. The one year Nuri was on the parade with us, he was 2. So she was nursing this story for 5 years. She was talking about beating down a 2-year-old. So that shocked me. But the attitude that they had of contempt and racism did not surprise me. And what was really, I think, very telling, and this has sort of gotten lost in a lot of this, is they made it sound as if this was a black versus brown thing. It wasn't, because they were talking trash about other Latino candidates. This was about the 3 of them holding power. And the people that they were gunning for most in that conversation, they came after me. They said I was, because I voted with Marquise and Karin and my other colleagues, I was the 4th black member. Hardly an insult, but they thought it was. They went after the organization that Karen Bass founded, the Community Coalition, which is based on Black-Brown coalition work. They went after Kiwa, the Korean Immigrant Worker Association, which is based on multiracial collaboration. They were against the idea of people working together. Their whole thing was about dividing. Their whole thing was for them to win, somebody else had to lose.
Exactly. And that's one of the things we heard about earlier is they're going to pull everyone else back. They're going to pull African Americans back. They're going to pull Walkins back. They're pulling Korean Americans back so that they can move themselves forward from a nationalistic standpoint. And I'm telling you, that's no different sometimes in white nationalism.
And they're still doing it. I mean, if you've listened to Kevin De Leon's interviews, he has apologized to his community. He's sort of apologized to me. I have not heard him apologize to the African American community.
And I'm glad you bring that up.
When you talk about their blindness, that Nuri woman had the temerity to talk about herself being a role model for young Latino girls.
That's right.
What she wants to create more hers, more Latino races. I mean, that is one of the most tone-deaf thing that woman could say. She's sorry she wanted to be a role model. No, what she wanted to be was a racist fool. You know, disguised as someone who was trying to do something because she wasn't trying to do anything. And it wasn't, as you said, it wasn't about, it was pro-Latino, anti-everybody else. And most Latinos that I know and that I work with don't come from that. Pro-Latino, anti-everybody else, not just black people. The comments about the Oaxacans were especially repulsive. Those are her people. These are Mexican people. But she didn't like them because they were dark-skinned. Again, that speaks to the anti-blackness. Because quite frankly, as Brother MC said earlier, Mexicans, Africans, there's a lot of mixture. I have a cousin, John Malveaux in Long Beach, who always talks about some of the Africans who led Mexican towns back in the 16th century. And he's got the whole long list. In fact, when I first came here, he said to me, I want to come and give a talk about the intersection between Mexicans and Africans. We haven't got around to it yet. We will get to it. But so she's attacking her people, speaking to not only the racism, but also the colorism. You know, if you're dark, there is something wrong with you. And so, but let me say this. I have heard a rumor, which I hope is a lie, that woman is going to lay low and then run again. And I have also heard a rumor that there are many who will support her. And this is I heard another rumor from a talent scout, actually, that the human being, I'm upgrading my language, that the human being is shopping a book. So, hello. So this woman has not apologized. I mean, what she's, and nobody, see, people apologize all the time. Apologies must be combined with action. This is why we must have reparations. Because you can't apologize. But you can't apologize for enslavement without doing something about it. Doing something about it is closing the wealth gap, is reparations.
And so, Dr. Malvo, I'm happy that you talk about action, because I like to talk about where we're going in terms of action. One of the things that we did October 9th is when the NAACP from California, Hawaii, as well as the LA branch, we issued a joint press release condemning the behavior, asking for the resignation of these individuals. We didn't go far enough. One of the things that I think we should be actually calling for is the official censure of these offending council members, and we need to take away their pay. If they want to sit there, if they want to do something, they should do it without receiving any money. Is that something that you would be willing to lead with the NAACP, the black community backing you up? Because these folks shouldn't be there. If they refuse to resign, let's refuse to pay them. Because that's what this is about. Just like Dr. Mavoa said, it's about money. Let's take away their money. Is this something you'd be willing to lead?
So I think they're going to be censured on Wednesday. I believe it's on the calendar for Wednesday. In fact, there were so many council members who wanted to sign the motion for censure. You can only have a certain number on a motion. We had to have two versions of it so everybody could be on, right? So it's going to pass unanimously. The question of the pay, we're looking at everything possibly we can do legally. What does it take? What level of stuff does it take to expel them if they don't resign? That's legally hard. It's not like Congress. We don't have that same authority. Whether or not we can suspend the pay, we're looking at that. We are literally looking at every possible thing we can. And if they don't, there's other people who are talking about doing a recall. I mean, everything is on the table. We are trying to find every means possible. There is no one on the council who wants them there. If they try to come, last Tuesday, when they tried to come back into the chambers, there was a crowd of people who demanded they leave. And it was a multi-ethnic crowd. It was all of Los Angeles that said, get out. If they try to come back, I'm afraid the same thing is going to happen. And I know that I will not be the only council member who will leave when they come in. And we can't have them there because we actually got work to do. We got stuff to do. We got to vote on censuring them. We got to vote on a special election to replace the ones who did resign. We've got to do all the reforms that we need to do. We need to get working on stuff like reinvesting money in neighborhoods that have been underinvested in. We've got a whole bunch of stuff to do. They can't be part of it. It's not legitimate with them there.
Well, I can tell you where we are. We're going to stand behind taking their pay. They took Mark Ridley Thomas's pay.
Yes, they did.
Let's take their pay the same exact way. And if they want to try to find a way to sue the city to get their pay back, let them take that legal route, but let's take their money, let's take their pay.
That's what Mark had to do.
Let's make them suffer the same way that they have made our community suffer with their harsh remarks towards our community. We've got to move forward with their pay. And I can tell you, I'm going to ask, if you are a LA County, a LA-based branch, can you just raise your hand? All right. And I can tell you, you see these branch leaders, they are going to all stand behind us. The California-Hawaii State Conference will stand behind you. But we are not going to sit back. We're not going to rest. And as President Mitchell said of the LA, we're not going to allow for these things to happen in the state of California or anywhere in the nation. So we're going to do everything that we can. Let's talk about solutions. Where do we go from here, Dr. Malvo? How do we solve this? How do we, outside of after we remove them, because that fight isn't going to stop, but how do we reconcile and how do we bring the community back together? What are your thoughts? And then I'm going to look to the councilman.
I really don't know how we heal because the wound is so deep. Not the wound about this, but the wound about anti-blackness that so many of us carry every day that we get up in the morning and breathe air. We have to dismantle a system that allows this kind of racism. And we have to go from top to bottom, looking at corporations that put up with this stuff, looking at, and their boards, which may, I think about, I'm not sure the number, but at least about 350 corporate boards have no black representation. But we buy their stuff, you know, so I mean, I'm not really, I mean, I'm an economist, so I don't do that kumbaya stuff. You know, I mean, yeah. When I try to meditate, I end up adding stuff up. I'm like, okay. So so healing is an ephemeral thing. But Dr. King once said, the law cannot make you love me, but it can keep you from lynching me. Right. So I don't care if we heal or not, because we know what our people have been through. What I care about is that people behave. I think the brother here said he fights for everybody, all human beings, that people embrace their humanity, and if they don't, that there are consequences, that you cannot operate in the public sphere, in the public space with that kind of nonsense. So, I mean, I've got friends who talk about community, we have to have conversations. Yes, we do have to have conversations, but a conversation and 50 cents will get you a newspaper in some of America's top 10 cities.
Yeah, some of them.
So I'm the wrong one to ask the healing conversation, because I tell people all the time, because I don't look it, I tell it. I was 69 on my last birthday. Someone said to me, in the wake of the little fried chicken incident, someone said, do you need counseling? Because your feelings must be hurt. I'm like, people have been saying stupid to me most of my life. No, I don't need counseling. They need counseling. And so, you know, hurt feelings, I don't do that. What we need to call it out wherever we see it. That's the thing. We need to call it out wherever we see it. In our boardrooms, in our classrooms, we need to call it out. And we need our healers, and there are healers in our community. I'm not one of them. There are somewhere in that pocketbook over there is a can of whip, you know what. Which I don't ever hesitate to carry with me. So, you know, like I said, but there's a Joy DeGry who does the psychology stuff. There are other folks who do that kind of stuff. Let them do the healing. I'm going to do the fighting.
All right. Council member, your thoughts. How do we bring this back together? How do we try to bring LA back together?
Well, first of all, I'm a little out of place here, because I'm usually the person in the room that says the thing that is most provocative, and I can't compete with you at all. A couple answers to that. The first thing is, we don't let them win.
That's right.
Yeah.
Their thing was divide people. Their thing was, for one person to win, someone else has to lose. That's a departure from how LA has tried to do things, and that's a departure from how we can do things. So, Tom Bradley, that was a multiracial coalition. Karen Bass, Mark Ridley Thomas, Maria Elena Duraso, Antonio Villaraigosa, an older generation that was all about multiracial, progressive coalitions doing things. Nuri and Kevin are a departure from that. Gil was that and fell way down. There's a new generation coming, right? Assemblyman Isaac Bryan and the woman who just defeated Gil Cedillo, Eunices Hernandez, right? Hugo Soto Martinez, who is likely to defeat my colleague Mitch O'Farrell, Marquise Harris Dawson. There is an incredible group of people now who have the ability to do what Karen and Mark and Maria Elena and Antonio did before, and build on it, and that can be done. But that's tone, that's style. What's like the real stuff, right? The real stuff is we have to deconstruct the systemic things built into the city.
That's right.
Right? So I represent a relatively, not exclusively, but a relatively wealthy and white district that historically gets stuff that Marquise's district doesn't. Or frankly, that Nuri's district didn't, right? That needs to change. It needs to be based on equity, not divide by 15, but where have things been historically disadvantaged and where does the money need to go? But then, I'm retiring in 51 days, thank God. And there are things that haven't been discussed in the national conversation about this. This has been a national conversation, right?
Yes.
It's been a national conversation about slurs against a little boy. And it's been focused on that. But it hasn't talked about the fact that even at his age, as a black boy, he faces a different standard of discipline in the school system.
Oh, come on.
It hasn't focused on the fact that when he's 10, people are going to see him as being a violent 18-year-old, right? They haven't focused on the fact that he's more likely to have a negative, violent interaction with police. And one of the things I want to do in my semi-retirement is try to steer the conversation in that direction, because everybody can get outraged about the slurs, and everybody can get outraged about the stuff on these tapes, but we got to get people outraged about that other stuff as well.
Come on.
And that's what the NAACP is about, and that's why we would like you to be a lifetime member. And I want to kind of build on something that you said in terms of, it being within potentially City Hall. Well, obviously, these racist thoughts came from our elected leaders, and it shows really the underbelly of what was happening in City Hall. Are you going to, I know we've asked for it from the NAACP, but are you going to help to lead, to call for an investigation to ensure that the operations or employment opportunities have not been withheld due to these kind of racist but secret discrimination type attitudes that are within City Hall?
Absolutely. I think that everything that has happened over the past few years, certainly in the couple of years that Nuri has been president, everything needs to be looked at. Where the Attorney General is investigating the redistricting process, which clearly had an anti-black bias. We have to look at the employment stuff that you mentioned, but we also have to look at the policies, right? African Americans are ridiculously disproportionately overrepresented in our homelessness population. Well, Kevin was in charge of our homelessness committee. Right? Gil was in charge of our housing committee.
Come on.
How did their biases impact policy? And there's a ton of stuff. I did, just the other night, I had the receipts. So I did a Twitter thread of 10, 12 things I could think of just off the top of my head that Nuri and Kevin and Gil had roadblocked or watered down or stalled that helped people in Los Angeles. Not just black people, but Latinos, renters. I mean, all of this stuff that they were working against. All of it has to be looked at.
So we knew that they were working with bias in their hearts, but yet they're leading policy decisions that we are overrepresented in. That is absolutely incredible. I'm going to look to y'all I'm going to look to you for closing thoughts. I'm going to then go to Dr. Malveaux, and then I'm going to close this up. And then I'm going to thank everybody for this conversation. No, we're not going to go to the audience for questions, but I'm going to look to you, council member.
What did she say?
Damn right.
Everyone agrees with you, neighbor.
So the thing I would like to say in closing, two things. One is, you saw the quotes, you heard them. You heard them say really shitty things about my little boy. Things about when he was 2 years old. What I want folks to know, my kid is awesome. My kid is full of joy. My kid is smart and strong and kind and funny and resilient as hell and adventurous. And I've said this many times over my years being his dad. I want to be like him when I grow up, not him be like me when I grow up. He's an amazing, amazing kid. The other thing I need to say is I need to say thank you, because we heard so much hate and racism and ugliness and hurt on those tapes. But what we have felt from Los Angeles, from literally around the world, but particularly from the African American community here in Los Angeles, has been incredible, incredible love. Last weekend, Danny Bakewell put on the Taste of Soul event in Crenshaw, and they invited our family, and they gave Jacob, that's my son's name, a tremendous round of applause and love, and it was the most amazing thing. And the only part of this week that he has experienced personally and directly, he's been told about things. As he gets older, he will read more of those things. We'll discuss more of those things. The only part that he experienced in person himself was that event, A Taste of Soul. And as the words sink in, as they sting, I'm hoping it will do so in the context of that incredible love that he was given. And I thank everybody for that.
Dr. Malveaux.
Well, I think that, Audre Lorde once wrote, the master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house.
That's right.
That's relevant in this context because we're trying to deal with these people in a traditional way. In other words, recall, right on. Take their pay, right on. But we're using the master's tools. We have to think outside the box about how these people are dealt with. And when we have to also understand they are not the only people. Structural racism, predatory capitalism, they're hand in hand. When you mention the actions that Kevin and Nuri had taken against renters, to what end? To the end of maximizing somebody else's profits, to the end of positioning themselves to be king and queen makers. And so we have to begin to think of untraditional ways. One of the things we might do is begin to start boycotting. I mean, just say, we're not going to spend any money here, or here. Now, economic boycotts have pros and minuses, but I think that we have to start thinking about some of these things. We have to say, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And it doesn't mean rhetoric. It means action. The Black Lives Matter folks have been sleeping outside of De Leon's house. They need to keep doing it.
Yep.
They need to keep doing it until his neighbors call the police on him. Not on them, because he's a public nuisance. And so as a public nuisance, you get rid of the public nuisance. The people wouldn't be there if he wasn't. But we just need to be highly creative about thinking about the fact that there are consequences, and then we have to drill down so that it's not just these three, not just the comments that were made about your son. And I like what you said, however, about the discipline issue. See, this again is baked into the system. The demonization of black people, and especially the demonization of black boys.
Yep.
You're talking about a child. But we see it all over. The number of suspensions and expulsions for black kids is 3 and 4 times more prevalent than among white kids. The D's and F's that black boys get is 3 or 4 times more than white boys. There are studies that show that black male misbehavior is highly punished. I have a tape right now of a 5-year-old girl who was handcuffed and threatened by a police officer in Florida because she had a tantrum. Children have tantrums. That's why they're children. It's when grown folks have tantrums that they need to be punished. And those fools on that tape were having a verbal tantrum, and somebody need to do something about it.
Well, I can tell you, Dr. Malveaux, the NAACP, we're not going to rest. We're not going to stop. We're going to continue to fight. We're going to have a tantrum till they take away their pay, till we drive them out of City Hall. We're not going to let them back in. We're going to allow for, and we're going to encourage folks to continue to sleep outside their house. You know, the best conversation I ever had was when I was working for, many moons ago, I worked for Ron Dellums when he was in the House of Representatives. I had an opportunity to have a conversation with Bobby Rush, and I said, were you more effective when you were out in the community and raising ruckus, or were you more effective than when you're inside the house now? His answer to me was, Rick, we need folks to do both. When I was out there, I was effective because I was banging the pots and pans and made sure that everybody knew that it was wrong. But now I'm inside the house and I'm trying to make change that's going to benefit and keep the folks banging outside the house. We're going to need those folks to continue to sleep at his house. We're going to need folks to continue to protest, and we're going to continue to work to remove their pay, to ask for investigations, to try to break down the systematic racism that we know is right in front of us and all around us. And I have to tell you, I do not envy you having to deal with the situation, but you're raising a young black boy. You have a family here. I encourage you to be part of this family, because we'll continue to do battle for black men, for black women, for people of color, because when black folks win, everybody wins. This is real.
Amen.
I want to thank Dr. Malveaux. I want to thank Councilmember Bonin. Let's give them both a big round of applause, please. I want to thank them for the conversation. And NAACP, this fight isn't over. It's just starting. They haven't heard the last from us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.